Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today we're looking at the Gospel of Mark. Who is this Mark guy? Does he have any idea what he's talking about? Where did we get this book? Unlike Matthew, Mark was not one of Jesus' 12 apostles, but Mark was part of the inner Christian circles. He often accompanied Paul and Barnabas on their mission. You see that throughout the book of Acts, and Paul mentions him personally. Colossians 4:10, he says, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, sends you his greetings, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. But it's not just Paul. Mark was closely united with Peter. In 1 Peter 5:13, Peter refers to him as his spiritual son. Again, if we go beyond the Bible to the church fathers, the people who actually knew these people, and we look at the writings of people like Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Origen, Eusebius, in their writings, we see this is because Mark was actually converted under Peter's preaching. And we know that's not just a one-time thing, but Peter had a connection to this family because in Acts chapter 12, when he's miraculously released from prison, he originally thought it was all a dream, but it was actually happening. And verse 12 says, when he realized this, he went to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many were gathered for prayer. He knew this was the place to go. There was a connection there. Peter, remember, was a fisherman. He was a blue-collar guy. He wasn't this eloquent speaker traveling to more metropolitan areas. He didn't know all the languages, but Mark was a guy who could work with him. The church fathers tell us that he documented Peter's teaching at the request of the Roman church, and Peter himself approved it. So Mark's gospel is really a retelling of Peter's preaching. We could call it the Gospel of Peter. Preaching to a mixed group of Jews and pagans in Rome, he couldn't simply rely on Hebrew scriptures the way Matthew does. To preach effectively, he had to explain who Jesus was, his purpose, his actions. And bear in mind, he's only got a limited time to work with because there's no telling that anybody's going to come back the next day. This is not a guy who is sitting down and carefully thinking out his message and preparing it. This is a guy who's telling this story and this story and this story, trying to show you who Jesus is. And so his teaching, it's very quick and it's rough and it's bouncing from idea to idea because he's describing Jesus as Savior, his compassion and miracles, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, his rebuking religious hypocrisy, calling people to turn from sin, loving and guiding his disciples. Finally, he's being betrayed, arrested, crucified. All of that's in Mark's gospel, despite it being the shortest gospel of all four. Like John, the second shortest, is still nearly 40% longer than Mark. Luke, the longest one, is actually over 70% longer. But although he's in such a hurry, he often adds these details that Matthew and Luke leave out when they're telling the exact same story, capturing these vivid little moments that stand out to him. And that's something that we can see of Peter elsewhere. John chapter 20, it's the day of the resurrection, and when the women go to the tomb, find it empty, run and tell the disciples, we see starting at verse 3, Peter and the other disciple, that's John, started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Now here, we see the impetuousness of Peter, who doesn't stop and peek in, but he just runs right in. But he doesn't just notice the linen wrappings lying there, but he also spots that the cloth that had covered his head is folded up neatly off to the side by itself. This extra little detail is something that only Peter spotted. So let's look in Mark for some of those little extra details. One of the most famous stories about Peter is when he denied Jesus. When you look at the story in Matthew 26:75, it says, suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And he went away weeping bitterly. But look at the story told from Peter's perspective in Mark 14:72. It says, and the rooster crowed a second time, and Peter called to mind the word that Jesus said to him, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And when he thought on this, he wept. Not only do we get the extra detail about it being the second time the rooster crowed, and oh, by the way, that's exactly how Jesus had said it, but notice that Mark just says Peter wept. Matthew said he wept bitterly. Peter, looking at this moment, probably for the rest of his life, never thought he could have possibly wept bitterly enough. It was such a terrible thing to deny Jesus. And that also leads to the significance of the morning of the resurrection. Once again, women come, find the empty tomb. Matthew 28:7, the angels tell them, and now go quickly and tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead and he's going ahead of you to Galilee. You'll see him there, remember what I have told you. It's a pretty general message, get the disciples, go to Galilee. But Peter's version in Mark 16:7 says, now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you before he died. If these angels specifically mentioned Peter, that might not have stuck out to the rest of the guys, but man, it did to Peter, because he's still raw in the heartbreak of knowing that he betrayed Jesus. But for this message to come and say, get the disciples, including Peter, he still counts. God's not done with him yet. that would have been everything to Peter, and he would never forget that one line. This is just some of the evidence. There's more that I don't have time to go into. That we are getting Peter's teaching very faithfully and accurately relayed by Mark, his close traveling companion and ministry partner. Peter understood the importance and the message of redemption. He tells the story of how much he messed up, but Jesus never gave up on him. That's the message he needed everyone to know. That's the message you still need to know. And Peter wasn't about to let the fact that he couldn't write it down stop this message from getting out. And that's why we have the Gospel of Mark. You can trust it, you can read it, and you can let it transform your life.